In the bustling city of Millbrook, where skyscrapers touched the clouds and business never seemed to sleep, there lived a man named Michael Thompson. From the outside, he looked like just another face in the crowd, someone who blended into the background, unnoticed and unremarkable. Michael was 42 years old, with graying hair at the temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of years of silent observation. He worked as a janitor at Global Innovations, one of the largest technology companies in the state. Every morning, he would arrive before sunrise, dressed in his dark blue uniform, pushing a cleaning cart through the immaculate hallways of the corporate headquarters. Most employees didn't even look at him. To them, he was invisible, just another cleaning staff member who kept the floors shiny and the trash bins empty. They would walk past him without a second glance, their eyes focused on their smartphones or their conversations about the next big project. But Michael wasn't just a janitor, not even close. Behind those worn-out work boots and that faded uniform was a mind sharper than most of the so-called executives who strutted around the office. What nobody knew was that Michael Thompson was actually the secret majority owner of Global Innovations, a fact he had carefully hidden for years. His journey to this point wasn't a typical success story. Michael had founded the company 15 years ago with his best friend and college roommate, David Rogers. They had started in a tiny garage, working endless nights, fueled by cheap coffee and big dreams. Their first product, a revolutionary software platform that could optimize business processes, had been their ticket to success. But success, Michael learned, wasn't always kind. 3 years into their venture, David had betrayed him. Using legal loopholes and manipulative tactics, he had maneuvered to push Michael out of the daily operations of the company. The legal battle that followed was brutal and exhausting. While David presented himself as the public face of Global Innovations, Michael was forced into the shadows. Most people would have been broken. Most people would have walked away, bitter and defeated. But not Michael Thompson. Instead of fighting openly, he made a different choice. He decided to stay close to the company. Not as a founder, not as an executive, but as something far more unassuming. A janitor. Nobody suspected anything. Why would they? Michael deliberately chose to look older than his actual age. He wore clothes that were slightly worn, moved with a slight stoop that made him seem less significant. His entire demeanor screamed background character, exactly how he wanted it. Day after day, he cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, and watched. And more importantly, he listened. Corporate hallways were full of secrets. Conversations dropped carelessly, near what people assumed were unimportant staff members, often revealed more than their speakers realized. Michael collected information like other people collected stamps, carefully, methodically, with a passion that burned quietly beneath his calm exterior. He knew every department's dynamics. He understood the strengths and weaknesses of every key employee. He was aware of potential innovations, internal conflicts, and strategic missteps long before they became apparent to the leadership team. What made Michael truly unique was his patience. He wasn't interested in immediate revenge or dramatic confrontations. No, he was playing a much longer, more sophisticated game. Every piece of information, every observation was another building block in his ultimate plan. David Rogers, now the CEO, had no idea that the very person he had once betrayed was working just meters away from his luxurious corner office. The man who looked like a simple janitor was actually monitoring every move, every decision, waiting for the perfect moment. Global Innovations had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. From the outside, it looked like a success story. Cutting-edge technology, impressive quarterly reports, and a reputation for innovation. But Michael knew the truth. Beneath the polished surface, the company was rotting. The corporate culture was toxic. Talented employees were constantly marginalized. Innovative ideas were crushed if they didn't align with the existing power structures. David and his inner circle were more interested in maintaining their positions than truly driving innovation. Michael had seen it all. The quiet bullying, the systematic elimination of independent thinkers, the way promising young talent was either co-opted or pushed out, and he had been collecting evidence, meticulously documenting everything. His disguise wasn't just about hiding. It was about understanding. Every mop stroke, every empty trash can was another opportunity to observe, to learn, to plan. Little did the employees of Global Innovations know that the unassuming janitor mopping the floors was about to change everything. Michael Thompson was waiting, watching, and preparing for a moment that would shake the entire company to its foundations. And when that moment came, nobody would see it coming. Jennifer Martinez sat at her desk, her fingers nervously tapping against the keyboard. She was a junior software developer, and today felt different. Something in the air seemed heavy with tension. Around her, the open-plan office of Global Innovations buzzed with its usual mix of energy and stress. Bright computer screens flickered, coffee machines hummed, and the constant sound of typing created a background rhythm that most employees had long since stopped noticing. Jennifer was different. She wasn't just another cog in the corporate machine. She had dreams, ideas that could potentially change everything. But in this environment, dreams were dangerous. She had learned that lesson the hard way. 6 months ago, she had developed a groundbreaking algorithm that could significantly improve the company's data processing speed. Instead of being celebrated, her idea had been quickly shut down by the senior management team. David Rogers, the CEO, hadn't even looked at her presentation. His assistant had simply handed her a polite rejection letter. Not aligned with our current strategy, the letter had said. But Jennifer knew the truth. Her algorithm was too good. It would make several existing systems obsolete, and that threatened the established power structures within the company. Those in comfortable positions didn't want real change. They wanted predictability. As she sat there, lost in thought, Michael Thompson pushed his cleaning cart quietly down the corridor. To anyone watching, he looked like he was simply doing his routine job. But his ears were open, his mind alert. He had noticed Jennifer before. She was different from most employees. While others seemed content to follow orders and maintain the status quo, Jennifer had a spark of rebellion in her eyes, a quiet determination that reminded Michael of himself years ago. Jennifer didn't know it, but Michael had already reviewed her proposal. In fact, he had studied it in great detail during one of his late-night sessions in the office, long after everyone else had gone home. Her algorithm was brilliant, potentially worth millions. The corporate world was full of people who looked important but contributed little. And then there were people like Jennifer, talented, innovative, but constantly pushed to the sidelines. Michael had seen this pattern repeat countless times over the years. In the corner office, David Rogers was having a meeting with the company's senior leadership team. Through the glass walls, Michael could see them discussing quarterly targets, their faces a mix of forced smiles and underlying tension. David was a master of appearances. Perfectly tailored suits, expensive watches, a smile that seemed carved by a professional photographer. But Michael knew the truth behind that polished exterior. He knew about the compromises, the small, and sometimes not so small ethical violations that kept the company running. The meeting continued, voices rising and falling. Michael continued his cleaning, moving almost invisibly between the desks. To the employees, he was just background noise, another nameless worker keeping the place clean. But Michael was collecting information. Every conversation, every subtle interaction was another piece of a complex puzzle he was putting together. And he was patient, extremely patient. Jennifer looked up and caught Michael's eye for a brief moment. Unlike most employees who looked through him, she gave a small, polite smile. Michael nodded slightly in return. In that brief moment of eye contact, something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that things were not always as they seemed. Little did Jennifer know that the quiet janitor would soon become the most important ally she could ever imagine. The day was just beginning, and at Global Innovations, nothing was quite what it appeared to be. The next few weeks at Global Innovations revealed a pattern of events that would change everything. Each day brought new tensions, new conflicts, and new opportunities for Michael Thompson to observe and document the growing problems within the company. It started on a Monday morning, just as the autumn weather was turning cold. Jennifer Martinez arrived early, hoping to avoid the usual morning rush of employees. She had spent the entire weekend working on an improved version of her algorithm, determined to make it impossible to ignore. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed Michael cleaning the windows. He worked steadily, methodically, his movements precise and careful. Something about his presence always made her feel oddly safe, though she couldn't explain why. "Good morning," she said softly, one of the few employees who ever acknowledged him. Michael nodded in return, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. He had been watching Jennifer's situation closely over the past few weeks. Her treatment was becoming a perfect example of everything wrong with the company culture. Later that morning, the real trouble began. David Rogers called an unexpected department meeting. All the software developers were required to attend, including Jennifer. The large conference room quickly filled with nervous energy as employees filed in. Michael positioned himself near the door, pretending to clean the nearby water cooler. Nobody paid him any attention. He was just part of the background, like the chairs or the potted plants. But his ears were sharp, and his memory was perfect. David Rogers stood at the front of the room, his expensive suit matching his carefully crafted image of success. "We need to talk about innovation," he announced, his voice carrying that false warmth that Michael had come to recognize so well. Or rather, the proper channels for innovation. Jennifer felt her heart sink. She knew what was coming. "Recently," David continued, "there have been some unauthorized development projects. Some people seem to think they can bypass proper procedures and create their own solutions without approval." His eyes swept the room, lingering briefly on Jennifer. The message was clear: fall in line or face consequences. Michael watched as Jennifer's shoulders tensed. He could see the conflict playing across her face, the battle between speaking up and staying quiet, between fighting for what was right and protecting her job. Other employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many of them had their own ideas, their own innovations they'd been too afraid to share. Jennifer's situation was a warning to them all. After the meeting, the office atmosphere grew even more tense. Small groups gathered in corners, speaking in whispers. Michael moved between them, catching fragments of conversations. "Did you see how he looked at Jennifer? She should have known better. Nobody survives going against David." The corporate machine was working exactly as designed, crushing independence, forcing conformity, maintaining the status quo that kept David Rogers and his inner circle in power. But what nobody realized was that every whispered conversation, every subtle act of intimidation, every misuse of power was being carefully noted. Michael Thompson, the invisible janitor, was building a case that would eventually bring the whole system crashing down. Throughout the day, Michael noticed more signs of the growing problems. Senior managers held closed-door meetings, their voices occasionally rising above the usual murmur. HR representatives moved through the office with unusual frequency, their presence adding to the atmosphere of surveillance and control. Jennifer tried to focus on her work, but the pressure was clearly affecting her. Her usual confidence was replaced by a nervous energy. She jumped slightly whenever someone walked past her desk, and her lunch sat untouched beside her keyboard. During his afternoon cleaning rounds, Michael deliberately lingered near her workstation. As he emptied her trash bin, he noticed her computer screen. She was still working on her algorithm, despite everything. Her determination reminded him of himself years ago, before David's betrayal had forced him into the shadows. The afternoon brought more developments. Sarah Chen, another talented developer who had supported Jennifer's ideas, was suddenly called to HR. She returned an hour later, pale and quiet, immediately beginning to pack her personal items. Michael watched as security escorted Sarah out of the building. The message couldn't have been clearer: support the wrong person, and you'll be next. The day wound down, but the tension remained. As employees began leaving for the evening, Michael overheard more conversations. Better delete any unauthorized projects. Just do what they want. It's not worth fighting. When the office was finally empty, Michael began his real work. After ensuring he was truly alone, he pulled out a small notebook from his cleaning cart. In it, he documented everything he had observed: names, dates, conversations, actions. Each entry was another piece of evidence, another nail in the coffin he was building for David Rogers' reign. But Michael knew that timing was crucial. Move too soon, and everything would fall apart. He needed more evidence, more witnesses, more proof of the systematic destruction of talent and innovation within Global Innovations. As he wrote his observations, Michael thought about Jennifer. She represented everything the company should have been encouraging: creativity, initiative, brilliance. Instead, she was being crushed by a system designed to protect mediocrity and maintain power structures. The next day brought more subtle forms of retaliation. Jennifer's access to certain development tools was mysteriously revoked. Her email requests went unanswered. Even the break room seemed to go quiet whenever she entered. Michael continued his patient observation, watching as the company's toxic culture revealed itself in countless small ways. Asterisk, a young intern was berated for suggesting a more efficient filing system. Asterisk, a mid-level manager was passed over for promotion after questioning budget allocations. Asterisk, a talented designer was assigned to menial tasks after disagreeing with a senior executive's vision. Each incident was carefully documented in Michael's growing collection of evidence, but he knew that documents alone weren't enough. He needed to understand the human cost, the real impact of this poisonous environment. During his lunch break, which he always took alone in the maintenance room, Michael reviewed his notes. The pattern was clear. Anyone who showed too much initiative or questioned the established order was systematically isolated and pushed out. But Jennifer was proving to be different. Despite the increasing pressure, she hadn't broken. If anything, the opposition seemed to strengthen her resolve. Michael had noticed her staying later each evening, working on her algorithm when she thought no one was watching. One evening, as Michael was finishing his cleaning rounds, he found Jennifer still at her desk, her face illuminated by the computer screen. She was crying silently, trying to hide her tears from the security cameras. It took every ounce of Michael's self-control not to reveal himself then and there, to tell her that she wasn't alone in this fight. But he knew the time wasn't right. Moving too soon would risk everything he had worked for. Instead, he quietly cleaned around her desk, maintaining his role as the invisible observer. But he made a mental note: Jennifer Martinez would play a crucial role in what was to come. The following week brought new developments. David Rogers announced a company-wide restructuring, supposedly to streamline operations and promote efficiency. But Michael knew the real purpose. It was another tool to eliminate potential threats to his authority. The restructuring created chaos and fear throughout the office. Nobody knew if their position was safe. Productivity plummeted as employees spent more time worrying about their jobs than doing actual work. Michael watched as the company he had built, the company that was supposed to be about innovation and progress, became a battleground of fear and survival. But he also saw something else: a growing undercurrent of resistance. Small groups of employees began meeting after hours, discussing their concerns in whispered conversations. Ideas were shared secretly, passed along through private channels. An underground network of support was forming, centered around people like Jennifer, who refused to be silenced. Michael documented it all. Each act of resistance, each example of management overreach, each instance of talent being wasted or destroyed. Everything went into his growing collection of evidence. The tension continued to build. David Rogers became more paranoid, installing new security cameras, implementing stricter monitoring of employee communications. But he never noticed the quiet janitor who moved through the building, watching and waiting. Jennifer's situation became increasingly difficult. Her projects were scrutinized with unusual intensity. Her suggestions were publicly dismissed in meetings. Even her basic work requests were delayed or denied. But she didn't quit. Instead, she adapted. Michael observed as she found new ways to work on her algorithm, using personal devices and staying late when the monitoring was less intense. Her resilience was impressive. The corporate culture at Global Innovations had become a perfect example of everything wrong with modern business. Creativity stifled by bureaucracy, talent crushed by politics, innovation sacrificed for control. Michael knew the time for action was approaching. The evidence was mounting, the patterns were clear, and the human cost was becoming too high to ignore. But he had learned from experience that timing was everything. So he continued his patient observation, gathering more evidence, watching as the company's toxic culture revealed itself in countless ways. Each day brought new examples of mismanagement, new instances of talent being wasted, new reasons why change was desperately needed. The storm was growing, and soon it would break. But for now, Michael Thompson, the invisible janitor, continued his quiet work, knowing that every piece of evidence he gathered brought him one step closer to reclaiming his company and restoring its original vision. Little did anyone suspect that the quiet man pushing a cleaning cart through their midst was actually orchestrating what would become the biggest corporate shakeup in the company's history. The day of reckoning was approaching, and when it arrived, nothing at Global Innovations would ever be the same. The morning it all changed started like any other at Global Innovations. The sun was barely rising over the city skyline when Michael Thompson arrived, dressed in his usual janitor's uniform. But today was different. Today, everything would change. He had chosen this particular Thursday for a reason. The company's annual board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and every major stakeholder would be present. David Rogers had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, ready to present another year of carefully manipulated success stories. As employees began arriving, Michael went about his usual cleaning routine. Nobody noticed anything different about him. Why would they? He had played this role perfectly for years. Even his slight limp, something he had carefully cultivated as part of his disguise, remained consistent. Jennifer Martinez arrived early, as usual. Her face showed the strain of recent weeks. The constant pressure, the isolation, the subtle harassment. It had all taken its toll. But there was still that spark in her eyes, that unwillingness to be broken. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, offering her usual kind smile. Michael nodded in return, but today he allowed himself a small, knowing smile. In less than 4 hours, Jennifer would understand why he had watched her struggles with such interest. The morning progressed normally. David Rogers arrived at 9:15, stepping out of his luxury car with his usual arrogant swagger. He barely glanced at the maintenance staff member holding the door open for him. The same man who had once been his business partner. The same man he had betrayed. Michael continued his work, moving through the building with practiced ease. But today, his cleaning cart contained more than just supplies. Hidden beneath the cleaning materials was a briefcase containing 15 years' worth of evidence. Documents, recordings, photographs, and testimonies that would shake Global Innovations to its core. At 9:45, board members began arriving. They were a mix of venture capitalists, industry veterans, and corporate lawyers, all people who had accepted David's version of events without question. Michael recognized each one, though none of them spared him a glance. As he cleaned the windows of the main conference room, Michael could see David inside, reviewing his presentation one last time. The CEO's confidence was obvious in every gesture. Why shouldn't he be confident? He had successfully maintained his illusion of control for years. At 9:55, Michael quietly entered the men's room on the executive floor. He locked the door and, for the first time in years, allowed himself to stand up straight. His transformation began. Off came the gray wig that had helped age him. Out came the contact lenses that had dulled his sharp green eyes. The padded uniform that had hidden his athletic build was replaced with an expertly tailored suit that had been hidden in his cart. Most importantly, he took out his real identification. Documents proving that he, Michael Thompson, was not just the majority shareholder of Global Innovations, but its true founder and rightful CEO. At 10 a.m. sharp, the board meeting began. David Rogers stood at the head of the table, ready to begin his presentation about another successful year. The room was full of powerful people, all believing they knew exactly what to expect. At 10:05, the door opened. The conversation in the room died immediately. Every head turned to look at the stranger who had just entered. A man none of them recognized, yet who carried himself with undeniable authority. David Rogers was the first to react. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting." "Security." Michael smiled, the first genuine smile he had shown in this building for years. "Hello, David. It's been a long time." The color drained from David's face as recognition slowly dawned. "Michael, surprised to see me?" Michael's voice was calm, controlled. "Though I suppose you should be. After all, you've walked past me almost every day for the past 3 years without a second glance." The board members looked between the two men in confusion. Michael didn't waste time. He opened his briefcase and began distributing documents to everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Thompson. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Global Innovations, and I'm here to show you what's really been happening at this company." For the next hour, Michael methodically presented his evidence. He showed how David had manipulated financial reports, suppressed innovation, and created a toxic culture of fear and compliance. He revealed recordings of threatening conversations, documentation of wrongful terminations, and proof of systematic discrimination against innovative employees. But perhaps the most damaging thing, Michael continued, has been the waste of human potential. Let me give you a recent example. He pressed a button on his phone, and moments later, Jennifer Martinez was escorted into the room by security. The same security team that had quietly remained loyal to Michael all these years. Jennifer looked confused, nervous, but Michael smiled reassuringly at her. "Ms. Martinez, would you please explain your algorithm to the board?" For the next 20 minutes, Jennifer presented her work. The board members listened with growing interest as she explained how her innovation could revolutionize the company's data processing capabilities. "This," Michael said when she finished, "is just one example of the talent and innovation that David's leadership has been systematically destroying. There are dozens more." David tried to interrupt, to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The board members' faces showed a mix of shock, anger, and disappointment as they realized how thoroughly they had been deceived. "I spent the last 3 years watching, documenting, and gathering evidence," Michael explained. "I could have revealed this sooner, but I needed to understand the full scope of the problem. I needed to see how deep the corruption went, and more importantly, I needed to identify the good people who have been suffering under this toxic leadership." The board meeting extended well into the afternoon. More employees were called in to testify. More evidence was presented. David Rogers sat in stunned silence as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. By 4 p.m., the board had reached several unanimous decisions. 1. David Rogers was to be immediately removed from his position as CEO. 2. A full investigation into his actions would be launched. 3. Michael Thompson would resume his role as CEO. 4. All employees who had been unfairly terminated would be offered their positions back. 5. Jennifer's algorithm would be fast-tracked for implementation. As security escorted David from the building, Michael stood at the window of what had once again become his office. He watched his former friend leave, feeling not triumph, but a mix of sadness and relief. The company he had built could finally return to its original mission, fostering innovation and rewarding talent. The news spread quickly through the building. Employees gathered in small groups, discussing the shocking revelations. Many couldn't believe that the quiet janitor they had barely noticed was actually the company's founder and new CEO. Jennifer stood in Michael's office, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked. "Why did you let us all suffer?" Michael turned from the window. because fixing the surface problems wouldn't have been enough. I needed to understand how deep the corruption went, who could be trusted, and who had the strength to stand up for what was right. He smiled at her. People like you, Jennifer. The next few days were a whirlwind of changes. Michael immediately began implementing reforms. A new innovation department was created, with Jennifer as its head. Anonymous reporting channels were established to prevent future abuse of power. Salary reviews were conducted to ensure fair compensation. A mentorship program was established to nurture new talent. Previous employees who had been forced out were contacted and offered their positions back. But perhaps the most significant change was in the company's culture. The fear and tension that had permeated every corner of the building began to dissipate. People started sharing ideas again, collaborating openly, taking creative risks. Michael made sure to maintain a visible presence throughout the company. He walked the halls, talked with employees, listened to their ideas and concerns. No one would ever feel invisible or unimportant again at Global Innovations. A month after the revelation, Michael called another company-wide meeting. This time, there was no fear in the room as employees filed in. Instead, there was anticipation and hope. I spent 3 years as your janitor, Michael began. I cleaned your offices, emptied your trash, and watched as this company lost its way. But I also saw your resilience, your creativity, your unwillingness to be completely silenced. He paused, looking around the room. Some of you might wonder why I chose such an unusual approach. I could have fought David legally, could have tried to force my way back in through conventional channels. But that wouldn't have shown me what I really needed to see, the heart and soul of this company. In those 3 years, I learned who stayed late to work on passion projects, even when they were discouraged. I saw who helped their colleagues, even when it might cost them. I witnessed small acts of rebellion against a corrupt system. And most importantly, I identified the people who never lost sight of what this company was meant to be. Jennifer sat in the front row, nodding slightly. She understood now why Michael had waited, why he had watched and gathered evidence for so long. It wasn't just about removing David. It was about understanding how to rebuild properly. Today, Michael continued, we start a new chapter. Global Innovations was founded on the belief that great ideas can come from anywhere, that every voice deserves to be heard, that innovation thrives when people feel safe and valued. He smiled, looking around at the faces of his employees. I've seen your potential. I've witnessed your strength. Now, let's show the world what we can really do. The applause that followed wasn't just approval. It was relief, hope, and determination all mixed together. Global Innovations was finally returning to its roots, becoming again the company it was always meant to be. As the meeting ended and employees began filing out, many stopped to shake Michael's hand or share a word. Some apologized for never noticing him during his time as a janitor. He accepted each apology with grace, using each interaction as a teaching moment about the importance of treating everyone with respect. Jennifer was the last to leave. She paused at the door, turning back to Michael. You know, even when you were the janitor, you were the only person who made me feel like I wasn't crazy for believing in my ideas. Michael nodded. Sometimes the people who seem the least important are the ones watching most carefully. Remember that, Jennifer. In your new role as Innovation Director, never underestimate anyone. Great ideas can come from anywhere. In the months that followed Michael Thompson's dramatic revelation, Global Innovations underwent a complete transformation. The changes weren't just in leadership or policies. They reached into every corner of the company, touching every employee's life in meaningful ways. The first major change came in the physical workspace itself. The imposing, closed-off executive offices were torn down and replaced with open, collaborative spaces. Michael moved his own office to the center of the main floor, with glass walls that symbolized his commitment to transparency. I spent enough time in the shadows, he explained to Jennifer during the renovation. This company will never again have hidden corners where power can be abused. The story of the CEO who had worked as a janitor spread quickly through the business world. News organizations wanted interviews, business schools requested case studies, and other companies began examining their own corporate cultures. But Michael wasn't interested in publicity. His focus remained firmly on rebuilding global innovations from the inside out. One morning, about 3 months after the revelation, Michael called Jennifer into his office. She found him looking through a familiar notebook, the one he had used to document everything during his time as a janitor. "Do you know what I learned during those 3 years?" he asked, gesturing for her to sit. "I learned that the real measure of a company isn't its stock price or its market share. It's how it treats people who appear to have no power." Jennifer nodded, remembering how kind Michael had been to her even when disguised as a maintenance worker. "Is that why you're making all these changes?" "Exactly." Michael opened the notebook. "Every person I saw being mistreated, every good idea that was shut down, every instance of bullying or discrimination. I wrote it all down. And now we're going to fix every single one of these issues." The changes began rolling out steadily. First came the Innovation Lab, a dedicated space where employees could work on personal projects during company time. Jennifer's algorithm became its first success story, improving the company's data processing speed by 300% and saving millions in operational costs. Next was the mentorship program, carefully designed to nurture new talent while preventing the formation of power cliques like the ones David had used to maintain control. Every employee, regardless of position, was encouraged to both teach and learn. The Human Resources Department was completely restructured. The old system of using HR as a tool for suppression was replaced with a new model focused on employee development and support. Anonymous reporting channels were established, and every complaint was thoroughly investigated. Michael implemented a unique policy he called the janitor's perspective. Every executive, including himself, spent 1 week each quarter working alongside the maintenance and support staff. It was a powerful reminder that every role in the company deserved respect. Sarah Chen, the developer who had been fired for supporting Jennifer's ideas, was one of the first people Michael brought back. She became the head of a new department focused on experimental technologies, with complete freedom to pursue innovative ideas. But perhaps the most significant change was in the company's culture. The fear that had once permeated every floor was replaced by an atmosphere of collaboration and creativity. People began sharing ideas openly, knowing they would be heard and respected. One day, about 6 months after the revelation, Jennifer found Michael cleaning his own office. Old habits, it seemed, died hard. "You don't have to do that anymore," she said, smiling. "We have a great maintenance staff." Michael put down the cleaning cloth. "You know, some of my best thinking happened while I was cleaning. There's something meditative about it. Plus, it helps me remember." "Remember what?" "That every job has value. That every person deserves respect. That sometimes the best view of a company comes from the ground up." The impact of these changes began showing in measurable ways. Employee satisfaction scores soared. Productivity increased. Innovation flourished. Even the company's stock price, which had initially dipped following the scandal, rebounded to record heights. But Michael wasn't interested in just the numbers. He paid attention to the small things. The conversations in break rooms, the collaboration happening in hallways, the way people carried themselves with newfound confidence. The story of David Rogers served as a constant reminder of what could happen when power was abused. He faced legal consequences for his actions, and the business world watched closely as the story unfolded. But at Global Innovations, his name became synonymous with the old way of doing things, a cautionary tale about the cost of valuing control over innovation. 1 year after the revelation, Michael organized a company-wide celebration, not to mark his return to power, but to celebrate what the company had become. In the newly renovated main hall, employees gathered from every department. The maintenance staff sat alongside developers. Junior employees mingled with executives. The hierarchical barriers that had once divided them were gone. Michael stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of people who were no longer just employees. They were partners in something extraordinary. A year ago, he began, I stood in this room with a mop and bucket, watching as fear and control stifled the incredible talent we had here. Today, I stand here as your CEO, but more importantly, as someone who has seen this company from every angle. He paused, looking around the room. Some of you have asked why I chose to work as a janitor instead of fighting David legally. The answer is simple. I needed to understand, not just what was wrong, but what was right. I needed to see who maintained their integrity, even when they thought no one was watching. Jennifer sat in the front row, remembering all the times she had greeted the quiet janitor, never suspecting he was watching over the company like a guardian angel. During those 3 years, Michael continued, I saw countless acts of kindness. I saw people helping each other despite the risk. I saw innovation happening in secret because the drive to create couldn't be completely suppressed. I saw the real heart of this company. He gestured to the walls around them, where photos of employees working together had replaced the old corporate artwork. These walls used to represent barriers. Now they showcase our unity. Every person in this room, regardless of their role, is essential to our success. The celebration continued late into the evening. People shared stories, laughed, and talked about their hopes for the future. The maintenance staff, who had once been Michael's colleagues, were treated with newfound respect. But the real testament to the company's transformation came in the small daily interactions. Asterisk, a senior developer asking a junior colleague for input. Asterisk, an executive having lunch with the maintenance team. Asterisk, innovation meetings where everyone's voice carried equal weight. Asterisk, employees feeling safe to share unconventional ideas. The story of global innovations became a case study in business schools around the world. Not just because of Michael's unusual approach to gathering evidence, but because of what came after. The successful transformation of a toxic corporate culture into something revolutionary. Other companies began sending representatives to learn from their example. Michael welcomed them, but always with the same warning. Don't just copy our policies. Understand your people. Listen to every voice. Remember that the most important insights often come from unexpected places. Jennifer's department became a model for collaborative innovation. Her team included people from all backgrounds, each bringing unique perspectives to their projects. The algorithm that had once been dismissed became just the first of many groundbreaking developments. As for Michael, he never forgot his time as a janitor. He kept his old uniform hanging in his office, a reminder of the importance of seeing things from different perspectives. Every morning, he still arrived early, walking the halls of his company, greeting every employee by name. The maintenance staff, in particular, held a special place in his heart. He had worked alongside them, shared their challenges, and understood their vital role in keeping the company running. Under his leadership, they received the same benefits, respect, and opportunities for advancement as every other employee. 2 years after the revelation, Global Innovations had become more than just a successful company. It was a blueprint for how businesses could operate in the modern world. Their products were innovative, their profits were strong, but their real achievement was in creating an environment where every person felt valued and heard. The final proof of their transformation came in an unexpected way. A young intern, barely 2 weeks into her job, came to Michael's office with an idea that challenged one of his own pet projects. Instead of being dismissed, she was given resources to develop her concept. 6 months later, her innovation saved the company millions. When asked about it, Michael simply smiled. If my time as a janitor taught me anything, it's that greatness can come from anywhere. The moment we stop listening to any voice, no matter how new or seemingly unimportant, is the moment we start failing. The legacy of the CEO who became a janitor lived on not just in stories or case studies, but in the daily reality of a company that had rediscovered its soul. Global Innovations became living proof that success and humanity could go hand in hand. that innovation flourished in an atmosphere of respect, and that sometimes the best way to lead was to first learn how to serve. Every year, on the anniversary of Michael's revelation, the company held a special celebration. But it wasn't about him. It was about the transformation they had all achieved together. The day became known as Perspective Day, a reminder that every viewpoint, every role, and every person mattered. The halls that had once echoed with fear now rang with the sound of collaboration and creativity. The company that had lost its way had found not just its path, but its heart. And it all began with a CEO who was willing to set aside his pride, pick up a mop, and learn to see his company through new eyes. As Michael often said in his talks to new employees, the greatest view of a mountain isn't always from the top. Sometimes you have to start from the bottom to really understand its true nature. And sometimes the most important person in the room isn't the one with the fancy title. It's the one with the courage to speak truth, regardless of their position. The story of global innovations became more than just a tale of corporate transformation. It became a testament to the power of humility, the importance of perspective, and the truth that real leadership isn't about control. It's about service, understanding, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it means starting over from the ground up.